From the Sunshine State, this is Tampa Bay's 10 Talk.
It's time for FLALAW, brought to you by the personal injury attorneys of Perinick, Caulfield, Averill, and Noyes. This hour will be informative, along with taking your questions and comments. Now, here are your hosts for today's show.
That's right. Welcome to FLALAW, live on the radio. Thank you for joining us. As you know, this is your live legal call-in talk show coming to you every Tuesday at 5 o'clock. Thank you for joining in. Hopefully you are a faithful listener. But if this is your first time, this is basically a show that we go over various legal topics dealing with Florida law that we believe are pertinent to our local community, things that can be helpful and insightful to you. As our intro stated, we are the personal injury attorneys of Perinick, Caulfield, Averill, and Noyes who host the show FLALAW on the radio, and we bring special guests to you, local attorneys and experts in their respective fields, to come on the show and talk to you about different topics. And so tonight is no different. We do have a special guest with us who is actually a repeat guest host with me, who has just come to us with really great topics over the time that we've been on the show. And so we are going to be touching on some great topics tonight with my special guest, attorney Zachariah Wade, who is practicing criminal defense law. And I'm going to give him a chance in a minute to introduce himself again and reintroduce himself to some about who he is, where he practices, and what he does before we jump into tonight's show, because there have been some very interesting changes in the law over just kind of just the last couple months in 2025 that can have a big impact on the way Floridians kind of move through the world nowadays. With that being said, before we jump in, I want to make sure you have all the details on how you can continue to listen in tonight for the 1 hour show, and also how you can listen later on. Let's say you can't finish tonight, but you want to continue to watch the rest of the show. We got you covered on various different platforms. So first things first, obviously, we're live right now in the WTAN studios, so you can listen to us at AM 1340, also 106.1 FM, live right now in those radio stations. But of course, we're also streaming on two platforms. We're on Facebook and we're on YouTube right now. So if you're not able to listen in your car on your radio, no problem. Tune in right now. We are in the studio and we're streaming through Facebook and YouTube. If you want to find those streams, just search our firm name, Perinick, Caulfield, Averill, and Noyes Injury Lawyers. You'll see the live feed. There should be a red circle around our logo. Click on that. You'll see myself and Zachariah in the studio. That's how you know you're in the right place. And then, of course, those will stay up for a while. You can always come back and watch those later. But if you're a podcaster and you don't mind just having the audio, when we got you covered there as well, we encourage you to follow the show on the, wherever you tend to listen to your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio. We are on all of those platforms. Just search FLALAW on the radio and you'll be able to find the episode, including tonight's episode, which will be uploaded after the show. And so we're going to be getting into quite a few topics tonight from the criminal law perspective. So Zachariah, welcome back.
Thank you.
Feel free to reintroduce yourself to our audience.
Sure. Thank you for having me. I think this is my third time on the show.
Yeah.
So I'm very happy to be back. My name is Zachariah Wade. I am a current criminal defense attorney here in Pinellas County. I've been practicing law for just under 10 years. I started my career as a state prosecutor, also here in Pinellas County. And about 5 years into that, I pivoted and started practicing defense work. So thank you for having me.
So tell us, what firm are you with if you didn't mention it? I'm not sure.
I didn't. Right now, I am a senior associate with the law offices of Marc and Pelletier. Shout out Mr.
Nice.
Pelletier. That is my boss, but also my mentor. And I call him my guru just because he's such a wealth of information. But that's where I'm at. I am the only associate. So we're a two-man team and we get a lot done.
Great. So we are going to be jumping into tonight because we've got quite a few topics to go over, and we're also teasing a special announcement at the end from Attorney Wade. So if you want to know what that special announcement is, you have to listen to the entire show because we got something special for you at the end. But with that being said, We're going into a new year soon, in 2026. And sometimes, we like to reflect back over what has changed. And I will tell you, there's been a lot that has changed in the law. There were hundreds of new bills that were signed, some pertaining to criminal law and various other things. And so I know that presents confusion a lot of times. People don't really know what's what, and they may not always respond in the appropriate ways. And so we've got a couple on I would say the docket for tonight, which is the super speeder law, which is what has basically been I guess described as, and then there's Trenton's law.
Correct.
Which obviously applies. I wouldn't say obviously because you may not know what that means just by hearing the name, but it applies to DUIs. And we have, of course, Florida is now an open carry state. And the funny thing about it, I think when we had you back some time ago, we are talking about concealed carry. And so now that has changed.
Absolutely.
And then if time permits, there's also some confusion about your tag and what you can have on your plate. And, that can lead to, lead to you getting pulled over for something silly, but then if you're not riding clean, how that can go. So you want to make sure you're legit all the way around. So hopefully we have time to touch on that too. But with that being said, from what I've heard in the news, even in just the first 100 days, there's already been dozens of arrests across the state regarding the super speeder law. So I want to touch on that first, if you don't mind.
Not at all.
So let's get into the super speeder laws. And that's something that I think I've been seeing some little videos, kids racing, getting pulled over, and it seems like they're really taking these seriously. So how do you feel about that? What does it mean? What is the law in that situation now?
Well, the law has changed to say that in the state of Florida, that means from, Tallahassee to the Keys, or the Panhandle to the Keys, I guess I should say, if you're traveling 50 miles per hour over the limit in whatever area you're in, or if you're found traveling over 100 miles per hour, 101, you'll be arrested. And law enforcement is taking that really seriously. I think this is a law, a change in the law that was sort of spurred by a lot of these street takeovers that you see, a lot of racing, a lot of things like that happening on the road. And unfortunately, it costs a lot of people their lives. There was actually an individual here in St. Pete. It was a father, I believe, and he took his son to one of these events and he lost his son. So law enforcement has really started to crack down on this type of driving. So that's the short and sweet version of it. If you're going 50 over or you break 100, law enforcement's going to take you out of that car and take you to jail.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I think people don't necessarily appreciate, that this isn't like a super fine or a super ticket, as it I think can sometimes be thought of, I just get a really, really high ticket now. No. This means arrest.
Absolutely. Right? It means you will be taken to jail. And what a lot of people don't realize, because not a lot of people are, career criminals, repeat offenders, never been in trouble. Is that when you get arrested on an offense like this, you are taken to jail and you'll have the opportunity to bond out or maybe even just be released. But after that, there's still the possibility that you be sentenced to jail for 30 days. And that's something that not a lot of people are aware of.
That's what I was actually going to get into. So what are the potential penalties that people can, I guess let's take us through that process. Because I saw a poor kid. I actually felt kind of bad for him. He was pretty young, but he's driving one of those fast cars. You know how that is. And they tend to display their speed in certain kinds of cars, but it was one of those. And I'm sure the kid was probably 19, maybe 20, if that, because the first thing he said, I was going to call my mom. But he got pulled over, and the officer was immediately putting his arms behind his back. And he's like, wait, what's going on? He clearly had no idea about the law. It had, the change in the law and such. So kind of walk us through what someone who has zero idea, they've maybe encountered speeding tickets before, but never arrested. What does that look like?
Sure. It's a completely different process. You are literally taken to jail. Obviously, we know what that means. But being arrested means that you have to go to the jail. You're going to be strip searched. Even if you're going to bond out immediately and you're not going into a cell, you're still strip searched, You're still processed. You still have to contact someone on the outside, maybe work, maybe someone to pick up your kids. It's just a really stressful situation. Yeah. But ultimately, you will get out of the jail, and then you have a court case. And typically, if it's a citation citation-based or a traffic-based offense, the officer is going to give you something called a notice to appear, and that's going to have a court date on there. And you go, you hire an attorney most times, and they'll go with you. But you start to work the case down from there. And what can really be a hard situation to move through is if you have a state attorney or a prosecutor who has decided they're going to take a hard stance against people who drive like this. And I would expect, I'm not speaking for the state attorney's office, not at all, but I would expect you see something like that from our local law enforcement agencies, because Pinellas County is such a hotbed for tourism, and during this time of year specifically. I think actually that's true. The city of Clearwater PD, just got a $75,000 grant from the Florida DOT for traffic enforcement. So they're going to be saturating the roads and looking for drivers.
Yeah, I was going to say that I would imagine they're going to start targeting this even more based on that. So, I mean, what are your thoughts? I don't know if you've seen any of these yet, but what do you feel like the prosecutors are going to have, as far as their approach to these?
Well, it really is going to depend on each different case, because there might be one individual who, like you said, has never had a speeding ticket, never been in trouble, never even been pulled over.
Yeah.
And if their first offense is doing over 100 miles an hour, or maybe not that egregious, maybe you're doing 50 over in an area. I don't know if that's better or worse. But the idea is that each prosecutor is going to look at each case individually. Yeah. And judge each on its own merits. Now, if you have a horrible driving record and you're busted going 100 on the interstate, that 30 days might be something that the prosecutor wants out of you, and then it's going to take a good attorney to try to work that case down. Right.
Well, speaking of a good attorney, obviously you've practiced on both sides of the V, if you will, as a former prosecutor.
Yep.
So what is kind of your approach to something like this? How do you defend these super speeder tickets? And is it just try to get it reduced down to just a traffic infraction, or how do you handle that?
That's a really great question. And I believe I have a unique perspective on that, because when I was a prosecutor, I was specifically a traffic homicide prosecutor.
I remember.
So I've dealt with cases where speed was a factor, alcohol was a factor. And I would say that, excuse me, now that I'm on the defense side of things, if someone comes to me, again, each case is different. Each case has to be picked apart and pulled apart and dissected. But the best thing that you can do, I think, to show that you deserve any type of reasonableness or leniency, or maybe not jail, right? Because that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
It would take a lot, but every effort I would direct my client towards would be showing the prosecutor that this will not happen again.
Yeah.
Whether that means a handwritten letter of apology, whether that means you go do some community service hours and you try to repay your debt that way. It's got to be something, because this became a law for a reason.
Right.
And a prosecutor is not just going to toss it aside and act like they don't care. So it'll take a lot of work, and there's no guarantee. You could do a lot of work with your attorney, and at the end of the day, the prosecutor can still demand 30 days, and that might actually happen.
And it could happen. Yeah. So I think that's the big takeaway for our listeners tonight is you have to be obviously very aware. I mean, there's some people that they drive fast, and they have, kind of just been able to get away with it, or a slap on the wrist or a ticket. But it's not just a ticket anymore. It's now become criminal, especially depending on the level of speed. So that's something to just obviously be mindful of. And it's just also for the safety of our roads. And I think that's the impetus behind this law, is to make our roads safer. As a personal injury attorney, that's obviously something that we 100% advocate for, because we can see how even low velocity, low speed accidents can cause major injuries, right? So when you're talking about speeds, in excess of 100 miles per hour, it's just can be absolutely devastating to someone. So, you just have to be mindful of these things. And of course, just know that if that does happen, we're talking, an arrest and possible jail time, right?
Absolutely.
And that's obviously been in effect as of July 1st. So this is something that is the new way of looking at the law here in Florida. Now, I think that's a good segue to kind of go back to Trenton's law that we talked about in our intro, because a lot of times when we have people driving at this high rate of speed, sometimes there's impairment involved, right?
Sometimes, yes.
So
alcohol and other things do impact your judgment.
Absolutely. So I think that's a good segue to talk about what happened as of October 1st. Under Trenton's law. So my understanding is that Florida's kind of stiffened the penalties for repeat DUIs. Is that right? Or is that a good way of kind of summarizing it?
Yeah, I think Trenton's law is really twofold. On one hand, it's like you said, if you repeat DUIs specifically that involve death. For
Okay,
example, if
right.
you've been convicted of DUI manslaughter, vehicular homicide, BUI manslaughter, which is boating under the influence, that's a second-degree felony.
Okay.
And there's going to be death points on your score sheet. There might be property damage. There's going to be a lot of other things, but typically you'll score between 10 and 12 years if you are impaired and you kill somebody.
Right.
And now this law has changed to say that if you do it again, I mean, God forbid that ever happen,
Right.
it would be reclassified as a first-degree felony, which increases the maximum penalty to 30 years in prison, I believe.
Makes perfect sense. Yeah. So then just to clarify what kinds of cases we're talking about, this Trenton's law doesn't necessarily impact, and correct me if I'm summarizing this incorrectly, but it doesn't necessarily impact DUIs or BUIs that don't involve death or fatalities. Is that right?
Well, that's the other part of Trenton's law that went into effect. It used to be the case that if you were pulled over for DUI and a police officer asks you to submit to a breath test, I mean, you're supposed to. If you look at your license, it says on your license that, having a Florida license means that you are consenting to field sobriety exercises. But as a human being, you still have the ability to say no.
Right.
It's called a refusal. And if you do that, it used to be the case that the DHSMV would essentially put more conditions on your license. There's penalties on that side of it, but not on the criminal side of things.
Right.
Now the law has changed to say that if you're accused of DUI or DUI or BUI and you refuse the breath test, that itself is now its own criminal offense. So if you're arrested for DUI and you refuse, now you get 2 charges. And the second one is a second-degree misdemeanor. That can be 60 days in jail by itself.
So let's talk about that, because I don't know if that was ever your philosophy, but I've heard in the past where people would say never blow. You just don't ever give a breathalyzer. And I could see pre-Trenton's law where that could potentially be valid advice. That's arguable. But now under Trenton's law, that could mean a misdemeanor charge, right?
Absolutely.
So what is your thoughts on the never blow advice? And would you ever give that advice now that the law has changed?
Well, because I'm a former prosecutor, right? And even though it could potentially hurt business, my first piece of advice is don't drink and drive. It's not illegal to do that. It's illegal to be impaired and drive. The hard part is that we as people don't sit down and figure out where that line is for us.
Sure.
So my first advice is, just don't drink and drive. Uber's way cheaper. We all know that.
It's too many options out there that are available for you.
Absolutely. You don't and the regret that you could feel accidentally taking someone's life cannot be erased. So take that seriously. But if you are unfortunately in that situation and now you're thinking, I know I'm not impaired and I'm mad, right? This police officer pulled me over for nothing. I don't want to blow. I don't want to cooperate. I don't want to do anything. And in your mind, you're thinking that you can beat that DUI. But now if you refuse the breath test, it's a separate charge on its own. Yeah. So I don't think there is any advice to give in that situation other than don't put yourself in it.
Don't put yourself in the situation.
It's an incredible decision to have to make. Yeah. If you know that you're impaired and you're going to refuse the breath test, then that is a decision you have to make. Yeah. Because that strengthens the DUI, but then that also confirms, giving a breath test strengthens the evidence against you in terms of a number. Now we know what your BAC is. Where if you refuse that, you don't give the state that evidence, but you give them everything they need to convict you for refusing. And you can still go to jail.
So while you're maybe helping one charge, you could be
hurting the other.
You're giving them what they need on the other.
Yeah. So there's really no right answer other than to just don't be in that situation.
Yeah. Absolutely. So then let's go back to pre-Trenton's law then, because you mentioned what it used to be, but I'm obviously not that clear on what it was. So my understanding, and maybe I am right, and I'm just not clear on how it actually worked, but before Trenton's law, my understanding was if you refused a breathalyzer, that your license could be suspended.
Correct.
For a period of time.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's what it was, right?
Right. It was a year. So
a year. Okay.
Before Trenton's law, if you're arrested for DUI and you blow over the legal limit, then it's 6 months suspension at the outset of your case. There might be another suspension at the end, depending on how things shake out.
Right.
But if you refuse the breath test, that initial suspension is longer or was longer.
Right.
And I think that actually still applies. Now, the additional
In
factor
addition to
is
that.
that it's its
Okay.
own charge.
So that has not changed.
Correct.
It's just now the separate charge. All right, good. So that clarifies things for me. So then when it comes to this misdemeanor charge, are you familiar with what the penalties are that could come along with that?
With a second degree misdemeanor, the penalty is typically here in Pinellas County, you'll see a $500 fine,
Okay.
and the max is 60 days in jail.
Wow. For something as simple as refusing a breathalyzer.
Correct.
Right.
And I want to throw this hypothetical at you, right? Say that you are pulled over for DUI,
Mhm.
you refuse the breath test, so now you have 2 charges,
Mhm.
and you take the DUI to trial and win. You can still be convicted for refusing the breath test
Wow.
because you still refused it.
So then I totally understand the situation behind the super speeder law. What are your thoughts on why the law changed when it comes to this breathalyzer issue?
Well, like I said a moment ago, when you get your Florida driver's license, it says on there that having a Florida driver's license and putting a car on the road means that you're going to consent to field sobriety
Mhm.
exercises.
Mhm.
But we have free will, and a lot of people, you see a lot of refusals. And I think that right, I'm assuming, but I think this was the legislature saying, no, we want people to take that more seriously. We want you to know that if you are driving and you're accused of being impaired, which is to say you're accused of putting other people at risk,
Right.
we want you to blow, and we want to know what your breath alcohol level is. I say the last little nugget I throw out there on this topic is that it might help a person decide whether to refuse or not, to know that in the criminal circuit, judges typically do not like to see a refusal.
Right.
It doesn't mean that they are more favorable towards people who blow, because that number might be through the roof. But an absolute refusal
Mhm.
can be damaging sometimes.
Okay. So then because you obviously gave us a very tricky scenario where you have a DUI charge, which is also separate from the Trenton's Law breathalyzer charge. How do you approach that when you're defending these kinds of cases, when one could potentially hurt the other, depending on your strategy?
Well, I leave every major decision up to my client, and my job is to give them as much information
Right.
as I can, give them all of their options, talk each one through to the
Mhm.
ultimate conclusion, and then let them decide, because that might be a situation where we say, hey, we can take this DUI.
Mhm.
We can take this to trial, and I really believe that I could beat it,
Mhm.
but we're sunk on
Yeah.
that refusal. And if I show the prosecutor this, they might work with us, or they might say, all right, take it to trial.
Yeah.
They might be willing to reduce something. They might not. It's different in every case, but ultimately the decision will have to be made by the client, whether
Yeah.
you want to try to resolve these together
Yep.
or separate them.
That will be definitely tricky for a lot of people, especially if you're dealing with individuals who, again, just don't really have a lot of experience with, being arrested or being involved in these sorts of things. And I could see how that super speeder law could be a pretext to leading into now, oh, I see your eyes are bloodshot.
Can you imagine being pulled over? And this happens, but being pulled over for going over 100. And so you're going to jail for that. But on top of that, now you're doing field sobriety exercise. It can get bad real quick.
It's going to get very hectic for you. So I think your advice was spot on with you just can't put yourselves in those situations, because you see how this can end up being a lot of charges stacked up on each other.
Very quickly.
Yeah, quickly. So it could turn into a very bad night. So I think this is a good point to take a short break. We have about one or two more topics, and then we'll get into our special announcement that we hope you are tuned in for. So we'll take a short break, and then we'll be back with attorney Zachariah Wade talking more about the new changes in Florida criminal law.
This is the Tan Talk Radio Network.
After a car accident, there are many questions that you need answers to. Who pays for my car repairs? Who pays for the medical bills? What about my lost wages? And more. The personal injury law firm of Pernick, Caulfield, Averill, and Noyes has been answering these questions for their clients for nearly 70 years. Since 1955, they've been a voice of the injured in the legal system. As one of the longest established law firms in Tampa Bay, Pernick, Caulfield, Averill, and Noyes is here to answer your questions. Listen to their live call-in radio show on this channel every Tuesday evening from 5 to 6 p.m. or call them at 727-796-8282 or visit them at voiceoftheinjured.com. Offices Clearwater, non-attorney spokesperson.
This is the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Yeah. Well, let's do that one first if you want. Let's do that one. And we are back with FLA Law live on the radio. Hopefully you have been tuned in this entire time, because if you have been, then you have been obviously getting a great show so far with attorney Zachariah Wade, who is almost our resident criminal defense lawyer at this point. He's come in quite a few times giving you great information about criminal law. And so before the break, we were talking about Trenton's Law, which is a new DUI law that impacts, obviously, Florida citizens. And then we also talked about the super speeder laws that have now turned into criminal misdemeanor charges for various excessive speeds. So now we're going to touch on something that has caused a lot of confusion. We've seen a lot of social media banter about it. And I figure let's talk about that first before we get into another topic that has been quite big over the past couple months. But first, let's clear up some confusion on this license plate cover issue in the state of Florida, because this is a new law that's catching a lot of drivers off guard. It's something that people don't really think about until they see those red and blue lights behind them, and they're like, stop sign? What stop sign?
Right.
You get the reference. It's like, what am I being pulled over for? And then it turns out it's your license plate cover, right? I've actually been pulled over for license plate cover, like back in college. But I will say mine was very tinted, and it just happened to be the one that my dad put on the car. But it was kind of dark, so I got it. It was legitimate. But so these are talking about tinted covers, maybe some that are too decorative that could potentially cover identifying information or things like that. But people are confused about this, right? So let's explain what has changed and what the real issue is. Like, do we have to take off the house divided Florida State Gators cover on our vehicles or not?
That's funny. Just a piece of advice. Yes, I would take it off, because of the confusion, right?
Okay.
And the confusion is based not on the statute itself, because it's actually pretty clear when you read it. The confusion actually comes from the different courts that have handed down opinions across the state.
Okay.
And so in different jurisdictions, you'll have different judges. Maybe over here they've said, if the plate border doesn't touch the registration sticker or the alphanumerics, the letters and numbers in the middle, then there's no problem. Whereas another judge has said, well, if the plate border is there and you can't see Sunshine State at the bottom, well, then that's a good traffic stop. And I think what the DHSMV and the legislature has done is try to clear that up.
Mm-hmm.
And they did a good job at it. I think what's causing a lot of confusion now is the precedent, is the understanding in different jurisdictions and within different law enforcement agencies that this might be the basis for a traffic stop. And so taking it one step further, recently, I think it was either yesterday or today, the DHSMV put out a memo making it very clear. There's even a photograph that shows what is an acceptable plate, and basically a plate border is going to be okay. But I would still say take it off, just because you might be in front of that one police officer who didn't get that memo just yet.
I gotcha.
And keep yourself safe and just take it off. But and I also want to say there's a difference between a plate border and a plate shield, right? If it goes over the entire license plate and it tints it and makes it darker, those I believe actually can defeat like a plate reader or toll booths, things like that. So those will always get you pulled over. But I think what we're talking about right now is just the border around the outside of the license plate. And those are legally, those are fine. But my advice is to take it off.
Okay. So you said that the law was very clear, aside from obviously the different case law and decisions from various jurisdictions. So what the FHA-CMV has put out, you said that was clear. What exactly does that say?
Well, it basically, so on a license plate, there are two pieces of information that a law enforcement officer is looking for. The alphanumeric, which in Florida is the 6 digits, or if you have a specialty tag, it's like 5 or whatever. But it's the letters and numbers, right?
Right.
Right there in the middle. That needs to be clearly visible. I think it's from 50 feet away. And also the registration sticker. And that registration sticker is supposed to be in the top right corner. There's like a little indent. Some people put them in every corner, and it gets weird, but it's only supposed to be there.
I've seen that on four sides. You got 4 stickers. Yeah.
And so the law says, the statute is clear because it says as long as those things can be read, there's nothing wrong with the plate border. Where we get into that confusion is that different courts have issued opinions that say otherwise. And that's why I believe the DHS&V put this out. And because it's become such a prevalent issue in such a short period of time, I actually don't think it's going to cause, I think the first judge that sees a motion to suppress or dismiss based on this is going to, okay.
Yeah.
Granted, we know what this is.
Yeah. Because that was actually going to be my next kind of point to you is like, why does this matter? Is this a real issue? But I could foresee how this becomes the new, you've got a tail light out kind of thing.
A pretextual stop.
Yeah.
I actually posted a video about this, I think last week, and there is an argument.
Tell us about it.
Sure. So a pretextual stop is, it's the definition of that feeling you get when you're pulled over and you say, you were just looking for something.
Looking for a reason. Yeah.
A law enforcement officer is allowed to have suspicion of criminal activity and pull you over based on something that has nothing to do with what they're suspicious of. For example, if they think that car just engaged in a narcotics transaction and they see it roll a stop sign, they can pull that car over.
Yeah.
And so there is a school of thought that says this change in the law is meant purely to give police another avenue to, pull people over. But that's why I think the DHS&V has cleared it up and said this is allowable. And it's sort of, erasing that.
Yeah. And so I think that the best way to be safe, to, like you said, really avoid an unnecessary encounter with the police. No one really wants to be stopped and have to deal with these issues, is to just not have them.
Yeah.
Right?
The DHS&V, I think they actually directed that memo to all law enforcement agencies, and I really appreciate that. But as a local criminal defense attorney, I would like all of our local law enforcement agencies to put out that memo letting us know that they've told their officers and deputies not to make any traffic stops based on the plate borders. And then I'll say, put it back on. But until I have that confirmation that my clients won't be in that situation, my advice is to just take it off.
Yeah. I mean, so that cute little frame you got off of Amazon with the paw prints and all that, let's just not even do it. It's not worth being pulled over for, especially once they stop you. Now they smell alcohol. Or, you've got something in plain sight or something like that.
Well, there's other ways that could become an issue too. A lot of people, I see a lot of PBA shields and golf club membership. Sometimes people take those metal shields and bolt them to their license plate. And that's something to be on the lookout for too, because if you do that and it covers anything.
I didn't consider that. Yeah, a lot of those things. Absolutely. So good advice. Great advice. And so the other topic that I wanted to circle back to you on, because we had talked about this a while back when the concealed weapon law had changed. There was something about the law had changed in that regard. And now since then, there's obviously been a change in regards to Florida now being an open carry state. And then there were some memos that had gone out. Sheriff Galtieri had given his opinions, and then there was that opinion. So bring us up to speed. Where do we stand as citizens in the state of Florida when it comes to carrying, and what should people really know about it?
If you are 21 years or older and you are not a convicted felon, you can open carry in the state of Florida.
Okay.
It's just as simple as that. And that's something that I'm personally a fan of. I think that you've heard people say things like an armed society is a polite society. In that frame of thought, I would say that with knowledge that more people have firearms, there's less likely to be crime. But there is something specific to be on the lookout for, right? And I don't think people think about this enough. If you're open carrying, that means people can see your gun, right? Such a simple thought, but that means that they know where it is. And there are people who will steal your gun. Okay. So that's just something that I want to say to be aware of, because it happens a lot and people don't think it will.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you brought up a point, because they can see your weapon, but is there any requirement as to how it's being carried? I mean, Does it have to be in a holster? Let's assume again that it's the place where you can lawfully carry openly. Does it matter the way it's being displayed?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I think from a legal perspective and just a layperson perspective, right? If knowing that open carry is legal in Florida, if I go into a store and I see someone with a pistol on their hip in a holster, that personally doesn't bother me. Now, if you have that pistol in your hand, I'm not coming in that. So I might draw, you know what I mean? Like I'm a little concerned now.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Same thing if you have a rifle and it's on a sling and it's on your back. Honestly, doesn't bother me. I've been to states where they open carry, and that's actually kind of normal.
Right.
But if that rifle is in front and you've got your hand on the grip, then that's a little more concerning. So the law doesn't specifically say you cannot have it in a certain way, but the way people interact
and perceive it, right?
You have to be mindful of that, because the idea is that if you're open carrying, you're not doing that to be cool. You're not doing that because you're trying to put on a show or get clicks. You're doing that because that's what makes you feel safer as you go about your day.
Sure.
You have your gun and it's visible. It's easier to access and you feel safer. Not I'm just going to be, Billy Bad Butt walking down the street with my AR.
Sure. And quite honestly, I just haven't really encountered as much as I would have expected. I think a lot of people got a little bit up in arms thinking, oh, it's the Wild Wild West. Now we're going to see guns everywhere, wherever we go. But I think the reason why we don't, because there's a lot of places where it's restricted, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Schools, definitely, government buildings, and places that are not necessarily government property, but they're going to have something posted, like a private business or a park. Every park says no firearms, right? It's not even a question.
Right.
Courthouses, I think I said that. Federal buildings. And so there's a lot of, if you looked at a map and you blacked out everywhere you can't go with a firearm, there would be a lot of black on that map.
Sure.
And I think that people do want to keep themselves safe. There's also not the need to be heavily armed walking around. Now, pistols, okay. But I'm glad that we're not seeing that response of people just super eager to walk around with their biggest firearm.
Agree. Absolutely. And so what do you think are some common mistakes that people may make now that there's been a change in the law that could make, kind of end them up in your office?
Not reading the statute.
Okay.
Statutes are on the internet for us all to read, and people will hear open carry and think, I can take my gun wherever I want. And then you drop your kid off at school, and now it's a problem. Because you forgot. And on that same thought, you're not supposed to have a gun on school property at all. So if you conceal in your vehicle and you pull through that pickup line,
the car line,
that technically, you're out of accord with the law. So there's a lot of things to think about, and that's one of the mistakes people make, is thinking that this one piece of information is all the information I need.
Right. And so besides obviously entering restricted zones, is there anything else that you think that people should really be aware of when it comes to, the open carry laws now that they are what they are? Sure.
And I say this because people surprise me sometimes with what we come up with. But open carry doesn't mean it's a free-for-all on firearms. It doesn't mean that any gun goes, right? There are still limitations on the type of firearm you can have. Some firearms have barrel length requirements, magazine capacity requirements. Obviously, switches are illegal, things like that. So it doesn't mean that anything goes. It means that you are allowed to let another person see your gun. And to show that difference, before this change in the law, in 790 I think it's 10, it's the gun statutes, it said that if you have a concealed weapons permit and another person sees your gun briefly as you're, moving or adjusting your clothes or whatever, that's not a crime. Because there is this idea that if you're a responsible gun owner and someone sees your gun, it's not a big deal. And so now we've just taken that further to say, if you see someone's gun, it's okay. They're allowed to have it.
So then what about situations where, let's say it's a private business that does not have any postings regarding the restriction of guns or weapons, and you come in with your weapon displayed and the owner of that establishment says, you know what, actually, I don't want you here with that gun. But there's no signage that says that's not allowed. And someone has an issue regarding leaving or whether they should leave, and the police are called and there's something that transpires from that. How do you address that kind of an issue, and what should be the response when a property owner tells you, you got to go?
That's good. So I went to Arizona a couple years ago. It was a great time, and that's an open carry state. And what I realized is that outside of every business, there was a sign. Well, not everyone, but the ones that don't want your gun in there, they have a sign, a picture of a gun with a line through it. Very clear.
We've
Don't
got
bring
one
your
at
gun
our
in here.
office. Yeah.
Well, there you go. And so I would say if that sign is there, respect it. If it's not, oh man, the lawyer brain is going crazy right now because I'm thinking like, what happened to make the shop owner say, get that out of here if he didn't put the sign up? But I guess, speaking to the question, if you're in a private business and that person asks you to leave and you don't, you're trespassing.
Okay.
Now, if you have a weapon on you and they have asked you to leave and you don't, that's armed trespassing. That's a felony that'll get you prison time.
Yeah.
So the best thing to do is leave if someone makes it clear that they're not comfortable. But what I've seen a lot of larger companies do, I think, the green grocery store with the sandwiches. I don't want to name drop.
I know the
they
ones
put
that
out
have
a memo.
the Tinder subs.
Yeah, there you go. They put out a memo, and I believe it said they're fine with it.
Yeah,
they're not going to cause any issues. You can go in there with your firearm. But
they have said that, and to be quite honest, I don't think I've seen any in that green store.
No,
at least not. I kind of mind my business though when I'm shopping, but I don't think I've really seen many people carrying theirs around. So. But with that being said, I think that's also the key is that if there is a request, you just know you gotta comply and put the gun away or leave or whatever, right?
Yeah. And I think most responsible gun owners that I've spoken to don't want to open carry.
Yeah.
We like the idea of being concealed because you're not supposed to see it unless, God forbid, you need to use it.
Yeah. That's always been the rule that I've gone by. If you want to show it, that means you must be getting ready to use it. So let's kind of do a quick recap then so that for those that maybe have joined in the beginning and it fell off or they came back and you missed different parts of it. I mean, let's go back and kind of summarize what we talked about in a nutshell. Dealing with something like Trenton's Law. Let's say you're down at the Bucks game, you're in a tailgate, and some things get rowdy, you're leaving and you get pulled over, you refuse a breath test. Are you now getting charged with a misdemeanor?
Yes. Trenton's Law made refusing the breath test in a DUI investigation its own crime.
Right. That is a very big change. And I think that's something that if you don't take away anything else, just know that now is the way the law is in the state of Florida. But I think the even better advice is what you may have missed is just don't put yourself in that situation. Do not drink and drive. We're in the holiday seasons, holiday parties, celebrations. New Year's is coming. Lots of alcohol. Don't drink and drive, folks. That's the number one takeaway.
Yeah, give these Uber drivers something to do.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's even other services, AAA, different things that will be at your disposal during this season. I know, again, it's job security for you. It's a busy time of year for you, I'm sure, but just don't do it, right? And so, all right, going back to open carry, if you accidentally walk into a store, let's say you're in Ybor and it says no guns, you missed the sign. Can you get arrested for that?
You could. I think in that situation, the best thing to do is just simply apologize and walk out.
Yeah, I agree. Now, you're going 50 over the speed limit and you get pulled over. What's happening?
You're going to jail.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be comfortable because if you're used to just a speeding ticket, license and registration, do you know how fast you were going?
Yeah.
But instead you get told to step out. Terrible day.
Yeah.
Terrible day.
And I'd sad to say that a lot of kids, they do silly things like school's going to be out soon, college and high school. And nowadays kids are like on social media documenting everything. Yeah. And I think I saw a story not that long ago. I want to say it was on either the Selman or maybe it was on Gandy. I don't recall, but there were two kids that were basically racing each other and they both got arrested for, the super speeder law. So it's like, guys, look, everything is not cool anymore. You want to videotape yourself doing things, but you're recording yourselves committing crimes.
They'll take your car too. I didn't say that earlier, but law enforcement always
impounded.
has the ability to actually seize your vehicle. If they can prove that your vehicle is being used in the commission of a crime, they can take it.
Right. So at the end of the day, there's been a lot of changes in Florida law, but it does make your life a lot busier. And if you need that kind of assistance, then you know who you can call. And that's a good segue into now, drum roll, this special announcement that we've been teasing from the beginning. I have had the pleasure of knowing Zachariah for quite a while, and he has decided to make an announcement tonight. So I will turn the floor over to him to do
Cool.
that.
I will look at the camera when I say this, because
Please
this
do.
is the first time I'm actually saying this publicly. But with extreme and tremendous humility and excitement, I am announcing that in 2026, I will be running for county court judge here in Pinellas County. So, yeah, really excited. Really
exciting news. So what does that mean, embarking on this journey? And I'm asking this very sincerely, because I obviously have never done it and don't know what the process entails. You will still have your practice while you're going through this process. So what does that mean for you and your cases and your clients and this journey?
Well, it means that my case load is going to go down a little bit so that I can dedicate some more time to campaigning and getting my name out there, letting people know what a great job I believe I'm going to do. But in terms of the dedication that I give to my clients, the level of communication, that's not going anywhere. The level of professionalism, I give everything I do my all. So if you can hear me, don't worry. But the goal is to ascend to the bench. And I believe that I'm at a point in my career and in my life where things are lining up, and this is the next progression.
Absolutely. And we have had other candidates in the past who have run for judge on the show. And I always tend to ask, what does the public or the community need to know about you, and why they think, why should they potentially vote for you?
That's great. Thank you for asking me that. Perspective. And I put a lot of thought to that. Experience.
You got some congratulations in the comments too. They're like,
awesome.
Judge Wade. It has a ring to it. It
has a nice ring to it. But and I totally blanked. What did you? Okay. I forgot what you asked me.
Why should they? What should the community need to know about you?
So I have the experience. I've been practicing law for just under 10 years. It's all been here in Pinellas County. I know this system. I know this circuit. And that's one thing. The dedication is proven, whether you were a victim in a case that I handled as a prosecutor, or whether you're a defendant in a case that I've handled as a private attorney. You know that I'm thorough and I commit myself to my work.
Absolutely.
But more than anything else, I believe it's perspective, not just from working as a prosecutor and a defense attorney, but my life. And I could go on, right? I could have filled the hour talking about me, but I don't want to do that. I'll just say that I have lived a full life. I've lived a lot of different environments, perspectives, situations. Well, I've seen a lot.
Yeah.
I feel old. I feel like an old soul. But I think that is probably what I bring that no one else can, is that all around perspective.
Yeah. And why do you think that's important, to kind of have someone who's seen things and tried cases and have life experiences on the bench? Why do you think that's important?
Well, I'm running for a county court seat, and they say that county court judges are the closest to the people.
I agree.
Those are the highest number of caseloads, county court judges. And I think the most intricate bad days, right? The most simple mistakes, I think those people end up in county court more easily. And I think that's why it's going to matter if I'm able to take this position, because then if you come into my courtroom, I understand the law, the procedure, I'm on that 100%. There won't be mistakes there, but I also understand you, no matter who you are.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. As like you said, it's excellent perspective to be able to understand people in the community that you would be presiding over. So with that being said, obviously that's coming into the new year. But going back to the season that we are in, people call this the most wonderful time of the year, but it can turn into some tricky, sticky situations. And so for people that are listening, tell us again how they can find you and be able to get in touch with you if any of these things start to come up. Obviously we talked about speeding, we talked about DUIs, and the various things that can lead to needing a criminal defense attorney. So how can people get in touch with you this time of year?
Well, the best way to reach me is my cell phone. I know a lot of lawyers say that, but I really do walk around with my cell, and I give the number to people.
You're a good man, Zachariah.
727-310-2908. I am a millennial, so you can text me and I will respond. I'm also on Instagram. My handle is Zachariah Wade ESQ. And I think our firm website is defensehelp.com. But really, in the age of technology, if you Google me, there'll be some way for you to contact me. And I hope you never have to call me. But if you do, I'll be here.
No, I say the same exact thing. We we never want people to really end up in situations that we end up helping people for, especially like myself as personal injury lawyers. We don't want people to get into car accidents, but when they do, because it's almost inevitable, and if you're driving on the roads that we drive on every day here locally, then it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so you want to know who you can call. And so that's why we kind of do what we do here as a service. And, as we get ready to close the show, I do want to make sure that we address that. At the end of the year, it's sometimes things slow down and people are closed for the holidays. But that doesn't mean that accidents stop happening. It doesn't mean that trouble doesn't come your way. And so don't try to go things on your own and not call an attorney. Absolutely give us a call. When things happen, that's what we're here for. So, there's office closures, but a lot of people, they have 24-hour access, and people like Zachariah Wade, who gives you their cell phone number, who you can text. I don't know, people text you from the scene.
Yes,
like,
I've had people call me and say, "Hey, talk to this police officer."
I am at the scene right now on Christmas Eve. Things happen. So that's what we are here for. We don't want those kinds of things to happen, but, they do. And so with that being said, be safe. Our last show, we talked about how, holiday parties can result in liability and different things. Just be mindful of your alcohol consumption. Children that are around minors who might be consuming alcohol. There's so many implications and things that can come along with that when you're hosting. So just be aware, of what's going on around you. I know it's all festive and it's a beautiful time and I love it. It's really my favorite time of the year.
Same.
But you can find yourself in sticky situations if you're not wise about how you're handling it. So keeping alcohol away from the kids, the teens who some people, if you're doing it at home, it's okay. It's not, especially when kids go out and they drive around with their friends. And then, of course, just being aware of getting in that vehicle. We talked about it, ride shares, Ubers, Lyfts, call a cab, call a friend, have a designated driver. Those are the kinds of things that are going to keep you safe and allow you to make it into 2026, because that's what we want to see, right? Yeah. So that's my soapbox. Is there any parting words you would like to share from the criminal defense lawyer perspective in this season, going into a new year?
I mean, I wish I could just say everything you said twice, because it really was that pointed and important. Specifically, you kind of made my ears perk up when you mentioned not letting the kids drink too, because something so seemingly harmless, a lot of people end up in jail and they never saw it coming. Yeah. There's just one special thing that happened. You might need your kid to drive because an emergency comes up. So maybe they should actually not drink. Right? It's just so many different little situations I can think of that can come up over the holidays. The best thing to do is think about it now and decide that you're not going to put yourself in those situations.
Absolutely. Give them your cell phone number one more time before we close out the show.
Absolutely. My direct line, this is no joke, my direct line is 727-310-2908. And if you need me, give me a call.
Absolutely. Don't call the station, call him directly. And as you know, we are the personal injury attorneys of Pernick, Caulfield, Averill, and Noyes. We can be found at voiceoftheinjured.com, usalaw.com. And of course, you can call or text us at 727-796-8282 for all your personal injury and car accident related needs. It has been a great show and a great announcement from Zachariah Wade, who will be running for county judge next year. That's very exciting. We thank you for your time tonight and informing us all about the new criminal laws that have changed. As you know, we will be back here every Tuesday at 5 p.m. We'll see you next week.